No, look at it! 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 I want all of you to look at it!
In an article from The Quietist published in May of 2024, author Iman Ford discusses how the music industry, due to a number of factors, may be on the way to a major downward trend. Despite steady growth in the last few years, Ford points out how things like the lack of a post-COVID bounce back for artists not at the top of the industry, and the nickel and diming of fans from things like exclusive superfan apps to exorbitant and, to be honest, extortionate ticket prices, were reminiscent of the year 1999, the year where though CD sales reigned supreme, the MP3 format was coming in hot and marked a 14-year decline in the music industry, with lack of humility and hubris from the tippy top of the industry being the culprits. It was quite the experiment to spend a couple of years living in 1999, all while knowing what the ending was. The warning signs of an impending disaster all were there if you were self-critical enough to spot them. And now, in 2024, with the same sense of arrogance and entitlement gripping the industry, I cannot help but feel like Cassandra. For those unaware, Cassandra is the Trojan priestess in Greek mythology who was fated to reveal prophecies that were true, but never to be believed. Real dramatic, I know, but I think Ford was onto something when he wrote this article. Hubris. According to Merriam-Webster, it means exaggerated pride or self-confidence. And there are a lot of people in the music industry overflowing with hubris. It's how we get larger-than-life performers, controversial and innovative auteurs, and many an inflated ego. Now, I know we're taught from a young age to be humble and gracious and make ourselves smaller because arrogance is frowned upon, but I feel like it's different when it comes to musicians. I feel artists can get away with having lots of hubris because once they get to a certain point, their art transcends their names. And then as listeners, we continue to feed that hubris, whether that be through becoming more than casual fans, buying/streaming their music, attending their concerts, buying whatever products they may slap their names on. I think about this whenever I hear this section from Pitbull's musings on Jennifer Lopez's 2013 single, Live It Up. Whose name is globally known? Whose name is on the check, and they add in an O? Whose name is on the blimp when the world is yours? Whose name on schools, huh? Slam for show. I know it's hard to understand how a boy grew to a man to a brand. The issue arises when your hubris leaves the containment of the inner sanctum of you and your dedicated fan base and begins to infect. That's a strong word. Let's say infiltrate. Damn, that's a stronger word. Encroach. That's a pretty strong word as well. Whatever. Force upon people who were none the wiser because you thought you were God's gift to the world. And while there are many topics that this can apply to that I'm not qualified to discuss, I think the release of U2's Songs of Innocence is a perfect case study on how hubris warps the mind of an artist.
I woke up at the moment the miracle occurred. I heard a song that made some sense out of the world. Everything I'd ever lost now had been returned in the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to It's Just Music, the YouTube channel where I subject you, the viewer, to whatever music-related topic I happen to be hyperfixating on. Today, we are going to be talking about the somewhat controversial 13th studio album by Irish rock band U2, 2014's Songs of Innocence. This album is a mix of meme and infamy at this point after its release over a decade ago. It's the album, if you happen to be an Apple product user, you could not escape until Apple promptly gave you a way to scrub the album from your music library. Even if you have an Apple product today, you probably still have the album on there if you didn't take the time to remove it.
Many Apple users weren't happy with our decision to give away U2's latest album, Songs of Innocence, as an automatic iTunes download. U2 is a band, I should add, that ranked #1 in a poll taken by senior Apple executives last April at a golf and spa retreat in Palm Springs, so we thought this was a no-brainer. But apparently, to today's youth, giving away a free album from one of the best bands of all time is like going to their house and taking a gigantic crap on their doorstep.
And an estimated $100 million deal brokered between the band and Apple Inc., with the blessing of CEO Tim Cook. Songs of Innocence was made available for free to Apple patrons on September 9, 2014, automatically added to your library. No cost, no fuss. We all like free things, right? Now, you'd think that receiving a brand spanking new album from one of the best-selling bands of all time would put people in a somewhat pleasant mood. But this was like that thing when people pay it forward at restaurants, but instead of covering the cost of a meal that the person actually wanted, you buy everyone in that restaurant the exact same meal, not taking into their personal likes, dislikes, dietary restrictions, etc. Sure, there are going to be people who like and appreciate the meal, but there are also going to be people who are going to be quite upset and just trash it. I, as a music consumer, am very ignorant when it comes to U2 and their career, and even after scripting this video, I'm still pretty ignorant. I didn't even know that they started their career back in the 70s, but I was familiar enough to know that they were pretty huge in their heyday. I knew the song's Beautiful Day because it was on a playlist of songs at the Goodwill I used to work at, funnily enough back in 2014, and Vertical because of the harshly colored iPod commercial that aired in the early 2000s. Oh, and that for some reason a lot of people really don't care for Bono or think he is very full of himself.
Hello everyone, I am Bono.
But looking at the conception of this album and its subsequent rollout, I feel you have to have quite a bit of hubris to think that despite dwindling popularity and an already polarizing public image, at least from your frontman, that you were going to give away your latest album for quote-unquote free to millions of people and hope for the best. Mind you, there are a handful of artists I believe would/could do this and possibly get away with it without so much backlash. There would still be some backlash nonetheless. I mean, Taylor Swift plastered her face on Papa John's pizza to push sales of her album Red, and I don't really hear too many people talking about that stunt. But you actually had to request the deal to get the album, and she didn't come to your house and forcefully make you listen to 22 on repeat while you were trying to watch TV with your extra large 2-topping pizza. But enough prattling on. Put me on in the background while you clean your house or scrub your iPhone of this album, and let's discuss Songs of Innocence. Like I stated earlier, Songs of Innocence is U2's 13th studio album. It also marks the longest gap between releases from the band at 5.5 years. The album before that, No Line on the Horizon, was met with positive reviews but lackluster sales from the band's perspective, topping out at around 5 million copies sold worldwide, without a breakout single to help bolster sales. For comparison, their release before Horizon, 2004's How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb, was the 4th best-selling album of that year worldwide with over 10 million copies and included the standout single Vertigo, which was a top 10 hit in almost every music market it charted in and had prominent advertising in an iPod commercial. No Line on the Horizon's first single, Get On Your Boots, was received tepidly and failed to capture the general public's attention. Here in the US, it peaked within the top 40 of the Hot 100 and was gone in 2 weeks' time. Bono had this to say about the album's commercial disappointment in an interview with the Associated Press. We weren't really in that mindset. We felt that the album is almost an extinct species, and we tried to create a mood and a feeling, and a beginning, middle, and an end. And I suppose we've made a work that's a bit challenging for people who have grown up on a diet of pop stars. This is usually the go-to complaint from aging musicians once their sales begin to see some sort of decline. Blame the newer, fresher, usually pop or pop-adjacent acts. And this excuse kind of doesn't work since in the 80s and 90s the band were up against world-renowned pop acts like Madonna, Michael Jackson, and the Spice Girls. Their 1987 album, The Joshua Tree, is among one of the best-selling albums of all time, with 25 million copies sold. Bono would later say that No Line on the Horizon was quote-unquote not very accessible, lyrically or musically. But at the time, it seemed likely between the burgeoning club boom of the late 2000s and early 2010s, and just to be frank, a dip in relevancy, it was bothering the band. Bono even said in a 2011 interview with Rolling Stone that he wasn't sure about the band's relevancy, and that he would be happy with just ending the band after No Line on the Horizon, though he also said in the same interview he doubted that would happen. Despite the slump in sales between those two albums, No Line on the Horizon's subsequent 360 tour grossed over $700 million and was at one point the most successful tour of all time. It now sits at 5th. Though as the tour pressed on, the number of Horizon songs on the setlist decreased from 6 during the first leg to 3 by the last, reflecting on how the band felt about the album and how they felt their audience felt about it as well. Adam Clayton echoed this sentiment in a 2011 interview with Rolling Stone. Yeah, it's unfortunate. We would like to be playing more of the material from the album. It got great reviews. There's great material on the record, but there's no point of banging away songs to people who don't get it. It didn't catch fire. It's old news now. The single didn't work, and when the single doesn't work, people don't have a way into the record. The band was struggling with their place in the world as a relevant music act. There were plans to release a comparative follow-up to No Line on the Horizon, Songs of the Ascent, in 2009, but the project was continually delayed due to the unfruitful recording sessions, the aforementioned 360 tour, and Bono and the Edge's work on the ill-fated musical Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, which can be a whole video in itself based on how much of a mess that was, but one thing at a time. The Irish Independent reported in December of 2009 that the band was in the process of recording their next album, aiming for a summer 2010 release. U2's manager at the time, Paul McGuinness, had this to say about the music. I've heard some of the stuff the guys played, and yeah, it's great. Bono is always an optimist, but he seems confident of getting a new record out by the end of the next 6 months. They're talking about June. By the time, we will be ready to go back on tour, and I think that'll give us a different flavor. McGuinness would change his tune in April of 2010, saying that the album would come towards the end of the year instead, but that music could make its way onto the band's tour. This was probably for the best because unfortunately, the summer leg of the 360 tour had to be rescheduled due to Bono undergoing emergency back surgery for a compressed sciatic nerve, extending the tour into the following year. However, they used the downtime to continue to work on the upcoming album. In August of 2010, news broke that the band was working on not 1, not 2, but 3, technically 4, albums. The aforementioned Songs of Ascent, a rock album, and a club-oriented record. Bono also wanted the band to further develop the songs he and The Edge were working on for the Spider-Man musical into a full-length LP, but was met with indifference from bassist Adam Clayton and drummer Larry Mullen Jr. Tracks mentioned were Glastonbury, named after the Summer Music Festival, with Bono comparing it to the Chemical Brothers and The Prodigy, and Return of the Stingray Guitar, a quote, furious rocker. Both songs eventually made it to the setlist of the 360 tour, but not the album proper. I need to circle back around to the club sounding stuff because apparently will.i.am, David Guetta, and Red One were all involved in this particular project. Imagine hearing a will.i.am produced U2 song. I know the rock purists would have lost their minds almost as bad as the indie rock crowd when Liz Phair decided to record a mainstream pop album. If that album were to see the light of day, this video will probably be on that instead. But in doing more research, I also learned that will.i.am was involved in the production process of No Line on the Horizon. In an excerpt from The Greatest Albums You'll Never Hear, it's noted that towards the end of 2008, frequent YouTube collaborators Steve Lillywhite and Brian Eno, as well as will.i.am, were in separate studios working on the album, with Bono stating he never wanted to do that again. Rapper Kanye West also announced this news via his official blog, which was one of the least odd things he's done in the past 15 years. will.i.am's contribution was additional production on the album's 5th single, I'll Go Crazy If I Don't Go Crazy Tonight. Luckily, or unluckily depending on who you ask, the club-centric U2 album was abandoned. In a 2011 exclusive with Rolling Stone, Bono says that the work on the album did with Red One in particular was very exciting, but wasn't at the essence of what U2 was good at. He further elaborated, saying U2 didn't want to be back in the clubs, as well as doing the quote-unquote U2 thing, which I would assume he means the arena rock stuff. Furthermore, the band felt the rock project encapsulated the essence of the band. David Guetta later clarified that he was only approached with the idea of working on a U2 project, but hadn't had any sessions with the band. This rock project, which would go on to be Songs of Innocence, was helmed by Brian Burton, better known as Danger Mouse, who produced for the likes of Norah Jones, Gorillaz, The Black Keys, and Adele. Bono had this to say about the Danger Mouse helm project to publication The Age. We may be about to do our best album ever, or we may be about to be irrelevant. The biggest challenge now will be to get a song on the radio. This seems to be one of the recurring motifs of this album, having a radio single to help the album sell. I can't speak for the rest of the band, but from what I'm getting from Bono is that despite the successes of the past, and the overwhelming bank he made on the 360 tour, he wanted to remain relevant to the general public, and the band was searching for a fresh producer who could do that for them. I do remember Danger Mouse being one of the producer du jours of the 2010s for the musicians who didn't hop on the club boom bandwagon, but from what I remember, most of his production work was more on the critically acclaimed side of success and not on the commercial side. Mind you, he did help produce Gorillaz' Feel Good Inc., and was one half of Gnarls Barkley, who made the hit Crazy, which happened to both be critically and commercially successful, but I just can't picture U2 on any of those types of songs. I happen to notice that these projects also saw the band distancing themselves from 4 of their previous collaborators: Steve Lillywhite, Brian Eno, Mark Ellis, aka Flood, and Daniel Lanois. Each of them have at least worked on one of the band's 4 previous albums up to that point. U2 would bring Flood back into the fold for Songs of Innocence's sessions a bit later down the line, but we will get there when we get there. The Danger Mouse sessions were proving to be rewarding for the band, and a tentative 2011 release date was set forth for the album. By this time, Songs of Ascent, which was supposed to be released in 2009, was scrapped entirely. One song from the project, Every Breaking Wave, was repurposed for Songs of Innocence. Initially recorded for the No Line on the Horizon sessions, and even previewed for music publications, the track was eventually left off at the behest of Coldplay frontman Chris Martin, stating that the song deserved to be finished. The song did make the setlist of the 360 tour, and it seems like the band was excited for this specific song. Maybe they believed that this was the elusive smash that Horizon was missing. In fact, it was slated to be the first single on the Ascent project, but when it was eventually discontinued, the song was retooled with Danger Mouse, One Republic lead singer / music producer Ryan Tedder, and music engineer / producer Declan Gaffney, who also worked on Horizon. In a 2015 cover story for Rolling Stone, the band spoke fondly of the Danger Mouse sessions, but also expressed some discontent with the sessions, saying that they were not honing in on the signature qualities the band was known for. There's a part of U2 he, Danger Mouse, was not interested in at all. Anything he feels he's heard before or is ordinary. We love taking risks, because that's how you carve out the next chapter in the story. But then we realized, okay, we've not delivered what you might call the hallmarks of our work. The big music. One song from the Danger Mouse sessions, Ordinary Love, made its way onto the soundtrack for the biopic Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom, starring Idris Elba. U2 received a personal request from disgraced music producer Harvey Weinstein to create a song for the soundtrack. It also received a limited vinyl run for Record Store Day 2013. It received positive reviews from critics, charted within the top 20 of a few countries, and received a Golden Globe win and an Oscar nomination for Best Original Song, but lost to Let It Go from Frozen.
We have been working for President Mandela since the 70s, since we were teenagers when we did our very first concert against the apartheid movement. So it's taken us 35 years to write this song.
Yes, baby! Larry, say something. You have to be quick, though.
Not only South Africa, but thanks to Mandela, the course of history in our country, Holy Catholic Ireland, was changed forever.
Eventually, Danger Mouse went back to his musical project Broken Bells and other commitments, which prompted the band to bring Tedder, Gaffney, Flood, and Paul Epworth on board to finish the work on the album and to lend a contrasting ear to Danger Mouse's work. Epworth, whose credits include acts like Block Party, Florence and the Machine, and Coldplay, had this to say about working on the album. Making a U2 record is like trying to get worms back in the can. You think you wrestled them in, and then suddenly they've popped out again. Their process is very much, find as many good ideas as you can and make the best ones fight it out. An influence of the album was producer Rick Rubin, though he wasn't a contributor to the project. Rubin had worked with U2 in the past and forced the band to make more traditionally structured songs than the band's usual technique for crafting a unique soundscape then building the song around it. Bono referred to the sessions as songwriting school. I went browsing through the U to Start forum to learn about their sessions with Rubin and found this quote from his time with them. Quote, "I tried to get them to do something that, historically, they didn't do so much. Work on songs before recording them." So from this quote, and if someone who's more familiar with the band can confirm or refute, the band seemed to have a more wing-it/improvisational approach to writing/recording their music. And from the very haphazard claims from the band, mostly Bono, the amount of scrap projects and musical directions, it feels very chaotic. Not to say that if the band wasn't feeling the direction that they were going in, they shouldn't try to reroute and try again. But as I'm seeing from fans of the band and even from the band members themselves, they, again, mostly Bono, will say that they have written, quote-unquote, 3 albums worth of material, but in reality, as this commenter said on the forum, means bits and pieces we still need to put together to become songs. Danger Mouse would come back later for some of the final sessions, though he had some mixed feelings about the work the other producers did on the tracks he started on. Nevertheless, he stuck around, saying that if the band wasn't happy with the tracks, then he wasn't happy. Bono had this to say about the album in a different Rolling Stone interview from 2014. "We wanted to make a very personal album. Let's try to figure out what we wanted to be in a band, the relationships around the band, our friendships, our lovers, our family. The whole album is first journeys. First journeys geographically, spiritually, sexually. And that's hard. But we went there." I guess this is as good a time as ever to talk about the title of the album. The title is derived from the collection of poems written by English author William Blake. Blake wrote 2 collections, this and Songs of Experience, which were later combined into Songs of Innocence and of Experience, shewing the 2 contrary states of the human soul. That is a mouthful. In a Rolling Stone interview discussing their 2017 album Songs of Experience, Bono had this to say about Blake's influence. "I try not to talk about William Blake too much because it sounds pretentious quoting such a literary giant, but it was his great idea I pinched to compare the person we become through experience to the person who set out on the journey. If you're talking about innocence, you probably already lost it, but I do believe at the far end of the experience, it's possible to recover it with wisdom. I'm not saying I have much of that, but what little I have, I wanted to cram into these songs. I know you 2 go into every album like it's their last one, but even more this time, I wanted people around me that I loved to know exactly how I felt. So a lot of these songs were kind of letters. Letters to Ali, letters to my sons and daughters, actually our sons and daughters. The album received another release date for December 2013, but due to the awards campaign for Ordinary Love and the passing of Nelson Mandela, further sessions were suspended until the band had completed those obligations. Billboard reported in November of that year that U2 had a new tentative date for Songs of Innocence for sometime in April of 2014, and were looking for brand partners to announce the project with a Super Bowl ad. Instead, the band teamed up with Bank of America and HIV/AIDS nonprofit RED, where they premiered a new track, Invisible, which was offered for free on iTunes. With each download of the song, Bank of America would donate $1 to RED during a limited 36-hour window. $3.1 million was raised. Listening to Invisible, it's a pretty good song, and I wouldn't have been mad if this had been the first single from the album. If I had any criticisms about it, I would say that it feels a bit closed off, which I would attribute to what I believe is the use of a drum machine and not actual drums, or the actual drums are playing second fiddle to the drum machine. I'm not too sure what's going on there. In an interview with USA Today, Bono said that Invisible was chosen for the campaign because it was the first one they finished and that they were still actively working on the album, with hopes that the album will come out that summer despite them already having lots and lots of songs. Aside from its charitable purpose, Invisible was also meant as sort of a reminder to the general public that the band was still around, despite the ongoing award campaign for Ordinary Love, but I guess no one was really checking for that award bait song. But speaking of, it makes me wonder why they didn't try to push Ordinary Love as an actual placeholder for the album, especially since the album wasn't released until 10 months after the fact. Ordinary Love had a decent showing on the charts worldwide, and I think with actual promotion, The song would have made it outside of its award prospects and could have gotten them a somewhat decent radio hit since that's what they wanted so bad. I'm not a music executive by any means. This just seems like a missed opportunity across the board. Though looking over the Ordinary Love entries on U2's website, it seems as if radio did play the song on rock formats, but I didn't see any radio format ad dates when I checked sources like All Access Media. But we press on. In March, there was another report of a delay via Billboard until 2015, but the band was quick to reassure fans that the album would still come that year, and producers Tedder and Epworth were called back to do additional production. Danger Mouse would also come back a little later to put on finishing touches. Despite working on the album for years at this point, it was reported that a good brunt of the work was done quickly at the end. Okay, at this point, I feel like we get the gist of the album creation process. It was quite messy to say the least. A lot of ideas, some that worked, some that didn't. Broker promises, delays, etc. But how did Apple get involved with the distribution of this album? Well, it's not too out of left field if you look into the band's relationship with the company pre-Innocence era. This article from Apple Insider by Steven Silver goes into greater detail, but just to get the meat of it all, U2 were kinda Apple shills, if that's the appropriate word. I already mentioned the iPod commercial with Vertigo tacked onto it, but the band collaborated with them for a special U2 theme Product Red edition of the iPod Nano. Bono and former Apple CEO Steve Jobs were close friends, so it's safe to say that Apple and U2 were like this. From what I read, the deal was orchestrated by multiple entities including the band, their label Universal Music Group, and the band's current manager, Guy Oseary. But I just like to think that Bono just called Tim Cook and was like, hey, we got this super special awesome album that we're working on. It's highly anticipated and we're U2. We're still like a super hot band. We also know you guys are having an event to reveal some new products, i.e. the iPhone 6 and Apple Watch. How about we give you guys exclusive rights to the album for about 5 or so weeks and give it to your customers for free, with free in quotation marks, and in turn, you pay us a nice chunk of change. That chunk of change was allegedly $100 million. And when I say free in quotation marks, I meant it because in an interview with Time, Bono says that they were paid and he doesn't give away music for free. While we have this $100 million number, it isn't necessarily $100 million in the pocket of the band. The New York Times stated that this deal included up to $100 million in marketing and a blanket royalty fee. But before we talk about the aftermath of this deal, I want to touch upon the album's cover. During the album's month-long exclusivity period with iTunes, Mad Agency London created a white plain paper slipcover with the band's name, the album name, and the date of the album. According to an archive post from the Mad Agency, the cover represents the 1977 to 1982 years of U2, as well as the vinyl promo releases of that period. After that exclusivity period, we got the cover that most people are familiar with now. British fashion photographer Glenn Lushford was commissioned, and it features drummer Larry Mullen Jr. and his son Aaron Elvis Mullen. There were a number of interesting interpretations of the cover from fans, from homoeroticism to cheese pizza, but this is what U2 said about it via their website. The idea of the unique relationship between a parent and a child, the image of a father and son, came from the band. The shoot with Larry and his son was initially an experiment, but everyone loved it as a visual metaphor for the record. Here's a blog post from YouTube fan Beth Naby that goes a lot more in depth about the second cover, so I will go ahead and I will link that below. Alright, back to our regularly scheduled program. On September 9, 2014, Apple held their keynote event where they announced the iPhone 6 and the Apple Watch. During this keynote, CEO Tim Cook announced a special performance by U2. They performed a brand new track, The Miracle of Joey Ramone, which is the opener and the first single of Songs of Innocence. After a standing ovation from the crowd, Cook announced that the album would be released to all of iTunes Store's customers at no cost. Unfortunately, this move would do more damage to the band than any underperforming radio single would.
Most people by now have heard about the new iPhone 6 models and the Apple Watch, but not everyone was aware of one smaller detail in Apple's announcement. Apple is giving away the latest U2 album to all iTunes users for free. This week, the U2 album automatically appeared in iTunes and on people's iOS devices, which led to people thinking that their accounts were hacked or there was some glitch because they didn't download it themselves. But don't worry, you haven't been hit with a U2 virus. It's just available through the cloud as part of the promotion. The album itself isn't actually being downloaded to your device until you tell it to download. Now, some users are frustrated because they don't know how to take it off. We have some instructions on CNET, but in short, there is an option you can turn off to show all music, which shows music from the cloud. In iTunes, you can't exactly delete the album, but you can hide it by right-clicking and selecting delete so you can keep living with or without U2.
Well, it is time for today's tech news from our Pepsi Tech Center. Getting something for free usually makes us happy, but a lot of customers aren't happy about a free gift from Apple. When the new Apple Watch and iPhone 6 were launched last week, Apple CEO Tim Cook announced customers with an iTunes account would be able to get U2's new album for free. Great, right? Well, what he didn't mention is that the album would automatically be added to users' iTunes libraries, whether they wanted it or not. The album's getting mixed reviews, and some users want it removed from their iTunes accounts. And it is possible Apple launched a tool to help you delete it.
U2 frontman Bono has apologized to anyone upset by the band's decision to automatically release its latest album to all iTunes users for free. In a Q&A on Facebook, the Dublin native blamed the decision to push the album to more than 500 million unsuspecting customers in 119 countries on a number of factors. Bono said, "I had this beautiful idea and we got carried away with ourselves. Artists are prone to that kind of thing. Drop of megalomania, touch of generosity, dash of self-promotion, and deep fear that these songs that we poured our life into over the last few years mightn't be heard. There's a lot of noise out there. I guess we got a little noisy ourselves to get through it."
During Apple's iPhone and iWatch announcement last week, the company slipped U2's new album, Songs of Innocence, into your iTunes account, whether you wanted it or not. And boy, did some people get mad. So much so that Apple set up an official page to help you get rid of the album. Megan joins us again to let us know how the heck we can get this album off our phones if we don't want it.
While the move was successful based on metrics and that fat check that the band got from Apple, there was almost immediate backlash from the media, Apple consumers, and other musicians. The general public were unhappy that Songs of Innocence was added to their libraries without their consent. There's of course this now iconic Twitter post from musician Tyler, the Creator, that writes, "Get off my fucking phone. You couldn't come up with an actual marketing idea? Fuck at you two. I don't want you. Fuck Bono. I didn't ask for you. I'm mad." In an article from the Washington Post, Chris Richard likened the release to rock and roll junk mail as he opined, "On Tuesday afternoon, U2's new album was just there, waiting for you, like an IKEA catalog, or a jury summons, or streptococcus. The latest inescapable unpleasantry for anyone who has chosen to participate in our great digital society. More specifically, the 500 million human beings on this planet who use iTunes." Due to the backlash, Apple quietly rolled out a way to remove the album from iPhones, though even in 2023, when I bought an iPhone 16 Pro Max, Songs of Innocence is readily available on Apple Music. I haven't bothered with removing it from there since I use Spotify mostly. I'm not sure if the deal just had the album be on Apple Music services until the end of time, but it's almost been 11 years since Songs of Innocence's release, and it's still there. The band made 2 public apologies about the intrusive album, the first being almost a month after its initial release via video.
"Oops, I'm sorry about that. I had this beautiful idea, might have gotten carried away with ourselves. Artists are prone to that kind of thing. A drop of megalomania, a touch of generosity, a dash of self-promotion, and a deep fear that these songs that we poured our life into over the last few years mightn't be heard. There's a lot of noise out there. I guess we got a little noisy ourselves to get through it."
The band also seemed to take the backlash somewhat in stride as they playfully talked about it on Graham Norton in October of that year.
Normally when bands come on, they're trying to flog an album, but everyone's got it already. So it's like, what's the point? I mean, we're thrilled. We're thrilled you're here.
It's that all the people who got very annoyed that it was given to them free, they now get to buy it.
But no, but that is but this is the madness.
This time yesterday, and that song's impregnated. I had to buy a special solution to take the song.
But no, but isn't it true? In the midweek charts, it's number 4.
Yeah.
So
yes,
but do they not know they've already got it?
But they haven't got the vinyl.
Okay.
They haven't got the CD.
So everyone gets it on the iTunes.
Right.
Who talked to who? Did you go to iTunes? Did iTunes come to you?
We worked very hard on these songs and we really believed in them, but we were scared they wouldn't, people wouldn't hear them, or it's tricky these days, to be heard. And we've been around a while. Why would anyone want another U2 album? We kind of asked ourselves that question. And no.
Poor U2. Who has worse luck than U2?
Songs of Innocence received mixed reviews from critics, with some being receptive of the band's more experimental nature, while others felt it was derivative and compared it to the likes of newer rock acts at the time like Imagine Dragons. The album's commercial success was also limited due to the Apple deal. Though it did hit the top 10 in most major music markets, the figures were some of the lowest the band saw in their career up until that point, which I feel defeated the purpose of what they were trying to achieve with the album. In December of 2014, the album was named the #1 album of 2014 by Rolling Stone, though it was later revealed in the 2017 book Sticky Fingers, The Life and Times of Jan Werner, that Werner, who was a publisher, dictated that the album should top the list because Bono was his flat buddy. Bono's friendship with Werner would also explain why most of the band's press through Rolling Stone seemed to feed their delusions of grandeur at the time. After all the reading and research for this video, I'm not sure how to feel about this debacle. One can view this as a cautionary tale about hubris, about overestimating your importance in someone's life, and delusion. Here you have this band who sold millions of records, made almost $1 billion from touring, said music, and said, nah, that's not enough for us. We need to subject the masses to our art. Even though it would probably be better at this time in our career to cater to our already established fan base. I also find it interesting that the band had 2 major music-related missteps that would have ended the careers of lesser artists. I guess I need to do that Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark video sometime in the future. If I were to be quite honest, maybe that YouTube Club record wouldn't have been so bad. Or maybe not even a whole record, but maybe a few singles and a little EP. Yes, the band would probably upset their diehard fans, but at least their craving for a hit could have been satiated if we had Bono fist pumping. I feel like this Reddit post sums out how devastating the release of Songs of Innocence was. I still remember this album's disastrous rollout and marketing, and it seems like many other people do too. It was a bad move forcing the album onto people's phones, annoying people to no end with the inability to delete it. Even now, I still hear people joke about this, and I totally get why. This didn't just piss off U2's core fan base, but annoyed people who didn't even like them in the first place, or were at most apathetic. It's one thing most people know about them, a career-defining bomb that reassured everyone's view of the band as pompous, obnoxious nuisances. Nothing screams obnoxious than a band forcing bland, past expiry date stadium rock on them with no way to escape, complete with that uncomfortable album cover, before deciding to make 2 more of these things.